The beeping came first, steady and thin, like a bird trapped somewhere behind the wall. Then the taste, copper and chalk, coating the back of my tongue the way it always did after the drip finished its work. My left arm ached where the IV pulled at the tape, and when I tried to shift my weight, the recliner creaked beneath me like it was tired of holding people up. Room 4B at Mobile Infirmary Cancer Center had fluorescent lights that turned everything the color of skim milk. I kept my eyes shut a while longer. The sedation from the anti-nausea medication was still dissolving at the edges of my brain, and if I opened my eyes too fast, the room would tilt, and if the room tilted, I would be sick. And I had already been sick twice today, and the nurses were running out of clean gowns in my size. My phone buzzed on the tray table beside the recliner. The vibration rattled against the plastic surface, loud enough to cut through the haze. I reached for it without opening my eyes, the way you reach for a glass of water in the dark. My fingers found the case. I brought it close. When I opened my eyes, the screen was a bright square of white. I blinked again. The letters swam, then sharpened, and I read the email notification that had been waiting for me while I slept. Baldwin County Recorder's Office. Document recorded. Warranty deed. Property, 14927 Coastal Heritage Drive, Gulf Shores, Alabama 36542. Grantee. A name I had never seen before. I read it again. Then a third time, slowly, the way you read the instructions on a prescription bottle when you suspect the pharmacist gave you the wrong one. 14927 Coastal Heritage Drive. My house. The house Ty and I found the week after our honeymoon. The one he burned the shrimp in while I laughed from the porch steps. The one I bought 6 months after his funeral with the life insurance money because I could not stand the idea of someone else standing in our kitchen. I had signed nothing. I had been in this recliner for 6 hours with saline and carboplatin flowing into my veins and a sedative keeping my body from rejecting it. My hand had held nothing today except a plastic cup of ice chips. I called the Baldwin County Recorder's Office. The words came out rough, still scraped thin from the sedation, and I had to repeat my name twice before the woman on the other end stopped asking me to speak up. "Yes, ma'am. I have it right here," she said. "Warranty deed, transferring the property from Harper Solis to," and then she said the buyer's name again, the name I still did not recognize. Notarized by Cheryl Voss. Executed under power of attorney by Glenn Solis. Power of attorney. Glenn Solis. My father. The line kept talking, but I stopped hearing it. The memory came without warning, the way it always did. Ty, 3 years ago, sitting across from me at the title company while we signed the closing papers. He had his reading glasses on, the ones with the crooked left arm he kept meaning to fix, and he was going through the documents one by one with the mechanical patience of the engineer he was. At some point he picked up his yellow highlighter and drew a line under a phone number on the title insurance page. "Just in case," he said. "I'm a just-in-case kind of guy." I told him he was being dramatic. He said dramatic was buying a beach house with life insurance money you had not received yet. We both laughed. Ty asked me once if we should set up powers of attorney. Just in case. I told him we were 30 and we had time. Then Ty died, and the time ran out, and my father signed my name on a document I had never seen, in a room I had never entered, on a day when I was unconscious in a hospital bed with chemicals dripping into the port they installed below my collarbone. The heart monitor beside my recliner beeped faster. The rhythm climbed from its slow, steady pace into something that sounded like a small animal running. A nurse appeared in the doorway, the same one who had held my hand during the IV insertion that morning when my veins kept collapsing. "Harper, your heart rate just spiked. You all right?" I looked at her. She had kind eyes and a lanyard that said Jenny in block letters. I had spent more time with Jenny in the past 4 months than I had spent with anyone in my family. "I'm fine," I said. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone I had never met. I put the phone face down on the tray table and closed my eyes. The beeping slowed. Jenny watched me for another minute, then left. I lay there in the recliner with the IV still dripping and the fluorescent lights pressing down on my eyelids, and for the first time in 7 months, my mind was not on the cancer. It was on the phone call I was about to make. My father picked up on the first ring. He answered so fast the line did not even finish its opening click, which told me he had been holding the phone, waiting, watching for my number. "Dad," I kept my voice level, "you sold my house." "Harper, listen to me." The tone he used was calm and measured, the same voice he had used when he explained how to change a tire the summer I turned 16. As if this were a household repair, as if selling someone's home from underneath them was a task you could walk through step by step. "Valerie needed help. She was in trouble. You forged my signature." A pause. I could hear Carol in the background, my mother's voice muffled and high. "Is that Harper? Tell her we love her. Tell her this was for the family." My father did not relay the message. He kept talking as if my mother were not in the room at all, and that told me more about the shape of things than anything he said next. "You weren't in a position to make decisions," he said. "You were in the hospital." "I am in the hospital. That does not mean I am dead, Harper." His voice dropped lower. Almost a whisper, the way he talked when he wanted you to understand that the conversation was finished and your agreement was not required. "You're not using that house. You haven't been there in months. Valerie could have lost everything. That is my house." It was sitting empty, like a car rusting in a yard, like something without a heartbeat. The porch came back to me, the one where Ty had burned the shrimp that first night, the grease fire that set off the smoke detector while we scrambled around the kitchen laughing so hard we could barely find the button, and the floor of the living room where I had lain on my back the week after his funeral, listening to rain hit the metal roof, deciding that I would keep breathing because the house still smelled like his aftershave and someone needed to be there to remember it. My father was talking about practical things, numbers and timelines and the shape of Valerie's debt, and I was barely listening. Then something caught me. "I still check the Ring camera every morning, Dad." I said it quietly. "I look at the porch. I pretend I'm sitting there." Glenn was silent for 3 seconds. 3 seconds is a long time when you are waiting for your father to say something human. He moved on to the next point instead, something about Valerie's payments and the deadline, and while he talked I heard it, a different vibration on his end, a buzzing that was separate from our call. He paused for a moment, and the buzzing stopped, and then he kept going as if it had never happened. I had heard that sound before, 3 weeks ago, the last time he visited, week 3 of chemo. He sat in the chair beside my recliner and put a bag of oranges on the tray table and talked about the weather in Pascagoula for 20 minutes. At one point, he reached into his pocket and looked at a phone I had never seen before, a black phone with no case, different from the silver Samsung he had carried for years. He looked at the screen for maybe 2 seconds, then put it away and asked me if the nurses were treating me well. That was the last time my father visited. He brought oranges and weather and a phone he did not want me to see, and then he left, and he did not come back. I slept at the infusion center that night because the nausea was too bad to drive. By Friday morning, it had settled enough for me to sit up without the room spinning, and a nurse named Marie drove me home to my apartment on the west side of Mobile because my own car had been sitting in the parking garage for 2 days, and I was too weak to walk the 4 blocks. The apartment was small and dark, and it smelled like the lavender plug-in I kept in the hall outlet because the chemo made everything else smell like burnt plastic. I went straight to the bedroom closet, top shelf, behind a box of Ty's running shoes that I kept meaning to donate and kept finding reasons not to. There was a banker's box labeled in Ty's handwriting, "House Docs, Thank You System," dust on the lid. I pulled it down and sat on the edge of the bed with the box on my lap. Inside, everything was organized with the same precision Ty had brought to his work at the shipyard. Every section divided by a labeled tab, every document in its clear sleeve, deed, insurance, title co, tax records, maintenance log, each one printed in his careful block letters. I touched the tabs one by one and my fingers were shaking, though whether that was the chemo or the grief or the anger I could not have told you, and it did not matter because the result was the same. I opened the tab marked Title Co. Inside was the owner's title insurance policy from First American, the one we purchased at closing because Ty insisted. He had highlighted the claims department phone number in yellow marker, and beside it, in the small, neat handwriting I would have recognized in a crowd of 1,000 documents, he had written, "Just in case." I'm a just-in-case kind of guy. I sat with the policy on my lap for a long time. The apartment was quiet. Through the wall, I could hear my neighbor's television, a game show with a host whose voice rose and fell in patterns that almost sounded like conversation. My father forged my name. He sold our house while I was sedated. He used the money to cover my sister's debts, and if I called this number, I would be setting something in motion that could not be undone. But he also did not ask. He sat in that chair for 20 minutes during week 3, and he never once asked me if I was in pain. He never said he was scared for me. He never said he was sorry he could not fix it. He brought oranges and weather and the silence where all those words should have been, and then he disappeared, and the next time his name appeared in my life it was on a forged power of attorney. I looked at the phone number. I looked at Ty's handwriting. I picked up my phone. First American Title Insurance. How may I direct your call? Claims department, please. Hold music. Something with a piano that was trying very hard to be calming. I sat on the bed in Ty's old Austell hoodie with the box of house documents on my lap and the taste of copper still in my mouth, and I waited. 2 minutes. The longest 2 minutes of my life. And I have spent 7 months in cancer treatment, so I have a high bar for long minutes. This is Renee Pryor, Senior Claims Examiner. How can I help you? I told her everything. I told her I owned a house in Gulf Shores. I told her my father had sold it using a power of attorney I had never signed. I told her I had been under sedation in a hospital bed at the exact time the notarization was recorded, and I told her the name of the notary and the name on the deed and the address that I checked every morning on my Ring doorbell camera because it was the only place left in the world that still felt like mine. Renee Pryor listened without interrupting. I could hear her typing, a steady rhythm behind my voice, and when I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Ma'am," she said, "based on what you've described, this is textbook fraud. I'm opening a claim effective immediately." I let out a breath that had been locked behind my ribs since the county recorder said my father's name. The air left my chest in a long, thin stream, and my shoulders dropped about 2 inches, and the heart monitor in my memory beeped slower. 1 call. Done. "I'm going to need your hospital records from the date on that notarization," Renee said. Her voice had an edge now, the professional kind. The kind that meant she was already 5 steps ahead and building a case in her head while she talked. "If you were under sedation when they say you signed that document, this is more than a civil matter, Mrs. Solis." I closed the box on my lap. Ty's handwriting looked up at me from the label. "House docs. Ty's system. It's Miss," I said, "and I will get you whatever you need." Renee Pryor called 3 times that Friday. Each call built on the last, and by the end of the evening the shape of what my father had done was visible in full, like bones surfacing through shallow water. The first call came at 1 in the afternoon. I was still on the couch in Ty's hoodie with the binder open on the coffee table, and when I picked up, Renee's voice had the clipped efficiency of someone who had already been working on my case for 2 hours. "I need your hospital records from the date the power of attorney was notarized," she said. "Specifically the sedation log and the nursing notes. If we can prove you were physically incapable of signing on that date, we have a clean fraud claim." I logged into the patient portal on my phone and signed the electronic release while Renee waited on the line. The records came through before 3 o'clock. Mobile Infirmary's system was faster than I expected. Or maybe Renee had a way of making systems move faster. The sedation log showed what I already carried in my body. IV sedation administered at 1:15 in the afternoon, patient monitored continuously. Sedation ended at 4:40. The power of attorney was notarized at 2:30. At 2:30 on that Tuesday, I had been unconscious in room 4B with a heart monitor clipped to my finger and a nurse checking my vitals every 15 minutes. My hand had held nothing. My eyes had been closed. And somewhere across Mobile County, a notary named Cheryl Voss had stamped a document with my name on it, as if I had been sitting right there in her office. The second call came at 4. Renee had pulled the recorded deed from the Baldwin County system and cross-referenced the notary. Cheryl Voss, licensed in Mobile County, carried an obligation under Alabama law to verify the identity of any signer in person. She had never met me. She had never laid eyes on me. She had notarized my signature based on my father's word alone. "That's a separate violation," Renee said. "The notary is exposed, which means she has every reason to cooperate when the DA comes knocking." The third call came at 6. The light through my apartment window had turned the color of weak tea, and I was sitting at the kitchen table eating saltine crackers because it was the only thing my stomach would accept. Renee's voice was different this time. Still professional, still precise, but there was something underneath it, like a current running below ice. "I've seen this before," she said. "My mother's brother did something similar to her house. She had dementia, and he transferred the deed while she was in assisted living. By the time we figured it out, she couldn't even remember the house existed." A pause. I wasn't in this field yet. I was selling auto insurance in Tuscaloosa. Another pause. Longer. "I'm in it now." She told me she was filing the claim that night and sending the criminal referral to the Baldwin County DA's office by email, all documentation attached: hospital sedation records, the deed copy, the notary information, my signed statement. Everything the DA's fraud unit would need would be waiting in their inbox when they walked in Saturday morning. "In the meantime," Renee said, "this deed is challenged. That means the transfer is frozen. The title is clouded. Nothing moves until we say it moves." I sat at the kitchen table after we hung up and ate another cracker and looked at the photograph on the refrigerator door. It was old, taken at some family barbecue when Valerie was 5 and I was 9. My father was carrying Valerie on his shoulders. My mother was holding my hand. Everyone was smiling, and the sunlight was doing that thing it does in old photographs where it makes the colors too warm, too gold, too much like the way you wish things had been. I was about to file a criminal referral against the man carrying Valerie on his shoulders. I finished the cracker. I put the box away. I did not take the photograph down. Later that night, I lay in bed with my phone propped on my chest, scrolling through the Ring doorbell app. I had been checking the camera every morning for 7 months, watching the empty porch from my hospital bed and my apartment because the app was the closest I could get to being there. The footage was usually the same: a delivery truck, a heron on the neighbor's mailbox, whined through the sea oats, but tonight I was not looking at the present. I was scrolling backward. I went past last week, past the week before, past the string of empty mornings where the only motion was the shadow of a cloud crossing the porch. I was looking for a specific window, 2 weeks before the date on the power of attorney, and when I found it, my thumb stopped moving. Tuesday, 10:47 in the morning, the camera activated on motion detection. A truck pulled into the driveway, white, familiar, my father's Silverado with the Chevron retiree sticker on the rear window. The driver's door opened, and Glenn Solis stepped out. He walked around to the passenger side and opened the door for a woman I had never seen before. She wore a dark blazer and had her hair pulled back, and she carried a clipboard and a measuring tape in one hand. A real estate agent. She had to be. My father led her up the porch steps. He unlocked the front door with the spare key I had given him 2 years ago, the one I pressed into his hand and said, "Keep this, just in case there is ever an emergency." They went inside. 47 minutes later, the Ring camera caught them coming back out. The woman wrote something on her clipboard while my father stood behind her with his hands in his pockets, watching. She said something I could not hear because Ring cameras do not record audio at that distance, and my father nodded. They shook hands. Before she left, the woman held up her phone and took 3 photographs of the front of the house from different angles, the kind of photographs you take when you are preparing a listing. 2 weeks before the power of attorney, 2 weeks before he forged my name, he had already walked a realtor through my house, already measured the rooms and photographed the exterior, already started the process of selling the one thing I had left. And on that Tuesday morning at 10:47, while my father unlocked my front door with my key and showed a stranger the rooms where Ty and I had lived, I had been lying in room 4B at Mobile Infirmary with an IV in my arm and a plastic cup of ice chips melting on the tray table beside me. I took screenshots of every frame: timestamp, truck, realtor, key, handshake, photographs. I sent them to Renee in a single email with 1 line of text. "He planned this." Renee replied 11 minutes later. "This is premeditation. The DA will want this." I put the phone on the nightstand and stared at the ceiling. The anger in my chest had changed shape. It was colder now, and harder, and it sat in a place below my ribs where the chemo cramps usually lived. For 7 months that space had belonged to the cancer. Tonight, something else had moved in. Saturday morning, the light came through my kitchen window at a low angle that turned the countertop the color of honey. I was sitting at the table with my laptop open, organizing the evidence into a folder for Renee. Hospital records, ring screenshots, the deed copy I had printed at the FedEx on Government Street, my written timeline of events. The work steadied me. It gave my hands something to do besides shake. My phone rang at 9:15. Renee. The DA's fraud unit picked up the referral this morning, she said. They fast-tracked it. Vulnerable victim, cancer patient, clear documentary evidence. They sent an investigator to the notary at 11. Cheryl Voss cooperated within the hour. Full written statement implicating your father. She said he brought the power of attorney to her office and told her you had authorized it, and she notarized it without meeting you or confirming your identity. I closed my eyes and let the words settle. The notary had broken, the paper trail was complete, and the DA's office had everything they needed to move forward. Depending on how fast they move, Renee said. We could see a warrant by early next week. For maybe 30 seconds, I sat in the kitchen and let myself believe it was going to be all right. The deed would be voided. The house would come back. I would finish chemo in 6 weeks and drive down to Gulf Shores and open the windows and sit on the porch and listen to the waves. And this entire thing would become a story I told in past tense. Then someone knocked on my door. I had not had a visitor in weeks. The delivery drivers left packages on the mat. The neighbors did not knock. I stood up from the table and walked to the door and looked through the peephole, and the face on the other side was one I had not seen in person since the 3rd week of my chemotherapy. Glenn Solis stood in the hallway in a wrinkled polo shirt and khaki pants that sagged at the waist. He had lost weight since the last time I saw him, enough that the shirt collar gapped around his neck. His eyes moved from my door to the hallway behind him and back again, and the expression on his face was something I had never seen on my father before. Glenn Solis, the man who ran a crew of 40 at the Chevron plant in Pascagoula for 35 years, the man who settled arguments at Thanksgiving by raising one hand and waiting until the table went silent, the man who had never once in my life admitted to being wrong about anything, looked afraid. I opened the door. Harper. He said my name the way you say something fragile, as if the word itself might crack. The buyer called me this morning. Said the title company flagged the deed. What did you do? I called the title insurance company, I said. Because you forged my signature. He stepped inside without waiting to be invited. My apartment was small enough that 3 steps put him in the kitchen. He looked around at the saltine crackers on the counter, and the laptop open on the table, and the evidence folder I had been building, and then he sat down in the only chair because my kitchen table only had one chair because I lived alone. I stayed standing. Listen to me, he said. His hands were flat on the table, pressed down hard, the way you brace yourself before you say something that has been sitting in your chest for weeks. This is bigger than Valerie's credit cards. This is bigger than debt collectors sending letters. He took a breath. There are people she owes. People who don't send letters. They came to my house, Harper, sat in my living room, 2 of them. Carol was in the kitchen and she could hear everything they said about what would happen to Valerie if the money didn't come through. His voice had dropped so low I had to lean forward to hear him. Carol didn't stop shaking for 3 days. In the pocket of his khaki pants, a phone buzzed. A different phone from the silver Samsung sitting face up on the table. He reached into his pocket and silenced it without looking at the screen, but his hand stayed wrapped around it, his fingers white at the knuckles. I had seen that phone before. 3 weeks ago, during his last visit, he had pulled it from his pocket for 2 seconds and then put it away before I could ask about it. Black case. Smaller than his Samsung. A phone he carried separately, the way you carry something you do not want anyone to know about. They came to your house, I repeated. My voice was flat and steady and did not sound like someone sitting in a cancer ward 48 hours ago, 2 weeks ago. In the kitchen. They were very specific about the timeline. I looked at my father across the kitchen table, the table with one chair. Because my husband was dead and my family did not visit and the oncologist had told me at my last appointment that the tumor was responding but we would need 2 more cycles to be sure. I stood in my own kitchen in Ty's hoodie with my IV bruise turning yellow on my left arm, and I listened to my father explain why he had stolen my house, and what I heard underneath every word was the same thing I had been hearing my entire life. Someone else's emergency was more important than mine. "Dad," I said, "I am fighting cancer. You forged my name and sold Ty's house to pay for Valerie's gambling debt, and you did all of it without once asking me if I was in pain." My father opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. The sound that came out was somewhere between a breath and the beginning of a word that never finished. "I am not dropping the claim." Glenn stood up from my one chair. The black phone in his pocket buzzed again, and this time he looked at the screen, and the expression that crossed his face was something beyond fear. It was the look of a man who had been balancing two disasters on either side of a beam, and the beam had just snapped. He walked to the door without saying goodbye and without turning around. The lock clicked behind him, and I stood alone in my kitchen with the laptop and the saltines and the honey-colored light, and the apartment was quieter than it had ever been. My father had been afraid, truly, deeply, visibly afraid. The first time in 62 years I had seen that particular expression on his face, and in his fear he had looked at his two daughters and chosen which one would pay the price. He chose the one in the hospital bed. He chose me. I waited until the sun went down before I called Valerie. The apartment had been silent for hours after Glenn left, and I spent most of that silence at the kitchen table doing something that surprised me: eating. A bowl of chicken broth from a can, then a piece of toast with butter, then another piece because the first one stayed down and my body was so hungry for something solid that my hands were reaching for the bread before my brain caught up. Chemo takes your appetite the way a flood takes furniture, carrying it out in pieces until you forget what the room looked like when it was full. But anger, it turned out, brought it back. My stomach was cooperating for the first time in days, and I was still angry enough to feed it. Valerie picked up on the fourth ring. "I know what you're going to say," she started, her voice running fast and high the way it always did when she was bracing for a hit. She had been bracing for hits her whole life, though the hits she took were the kind she placed on herself. "Val," I kept my voice steady. "Dad told me people came to the house." The line went quiet. Then crying, real crying, the kind that comes from the chest and shakes the words apart before they can form. She told me everything. The online sports betting had started during COVID, the same year everyone was locked in their apartments looking for something to pass the time. $50 on a basketball game, then $500, then $5,000. She could not tell me the exact number anymore because at some point the numbers had stopped feeling like money and started feeling like points in a game she was always about to win. DraftKings, FanDuel, every legal app that ran ads during halftime. $90,000 across those platforms, with a wage garnishment order already filed against her bartender's salary at the casino resort in Biloxi. And then, the other $70,000, the money she owed to people who did not operate through apps or customer service lines or legal garnishment orders. People who sat in your father's kitchen and told him what would happen to his daughter if the money did not arrive on time. "I told Dad not to sell your house." Valerie's voice cracked on the word house. "I begged him, Harper. He said you had agreed. He showed me a text from you saying it was okay." I sat very still. My father had shown Valerie a text message from me, a text message I had never written, on a phone I had never used to say the words I had never spoken. He had forged the power of attorney to fool the county recorder and the notary and the buyer, and then he had forged a text message to fool his other daughter. Every person in this family had received a different version of the truth, and the only one who held the original was Glenn. "I'm so sorry," Valerie said. "I'm so sorry, Harper. I swear I didn't know." She was telling the truth. I could hear it in the ragged edges of her voice, and I could see it in the shape of 29 years of watching this woman fail at many things, at budgets and relationships and the ability to leave a casino before last call, but never once at forging a document or fabricating a lie with layers. Valerie's failures were loud and obvious, and she wore them on the outside where everyone could see. That was the difference between my sister and my father. She fell apart in public. He fell apart behind closed doors, with forged signatures and second phones, and a silence that looked like strength until you peeled it back and found the fear underneath. We talked for another 20 minutes. She asked me about the chemo, and I told her the truth, which was that I was tired and sick, and the tumors were shrinking, but slowly, and she said she was sorry she had not called more, and I said I was sorry I had not called at all, and for a few minutes we were just two sisters on the phone, with a wreck between us that neither of us had built. Sunday morning, I woke up on the bathroom floor. The nausea had hit around 4 a.m, the deep, rolling kind that starts in the abdomen and climbs until your whole body is a fist trying to turn itself inside out. I made it to the toilet in time, and then again 20 minutes later. And by the third round, my legs were too weak to carry me back to the bed, so I stayed where I was, my back against the base of the toilet, and a damp washcloth across my forehead and my knees drawn up under Ty's hoodie like a child waiting for a storm to pass. The bathroom tile was cold against my bare calves. The light from the window was gray and thin. Early morning, the kind of light that does not commit to being either dark or bright. My phone lay on the floor beside the drain where I had dropped it during the second round, and when it buzzed, I turned my head slowly and looked at the screen. Mom. I picked it up. Maybe because the floor was cold and the apartment was quiet, and my body had just spent an hour emptying itself of everything it contained, and in that emptied-out moment any human voice would do, even one that belonged to a woman who had watched my father forge my name and said nothing. Harper, honey. My mother's voice was soft and careful, the voice she used when she wanted something wrapped in the language of concern. I need you to listen. I'm listening, Mom. The buyer. The people your father sold the house to. Their lawyer called yesterday. They paid $720,000, Harper. The title company froze everything, and now they want every penny back. They are threatening to sue your father. That's between Dad and the buyer. And the other people. Her voice dropped. The house money was not enough. They want the rest. They gave your father until the end of the month. I lay on the bathroom floor, with my cheek against the tile, and the taste of bile still sharp at the back of my throat. Through the phone, I could hear my mother breathing, the thin whistling breaths she made when she was trying not to cry, and behind that, the sound of the television in their living room, turned down low, some morning news program where people in bright clothes talked about things that did not matter. Harper, I am asking you to think about this. If you drop the claim, the deed stands and the buyer keeps the house, and there is no lawsuit. Your father is safe. The family is safe. The family. We are still a family. I closed my eyes. The bathroom floor hummed against my skull, some vibration from the pipes or the building's foundation, a low-frequency sound that you could only hear when you were lying flat with nothing between your body and the ground. My mother was asking me a question she had been asking my entire life, dressed in different clothes each time but wearing the same face underneath. When I was 14, Harper, Valerie needs your room. You can sleep on the couch. When I was 22, Harper, please do not make a scene at Dad's retirement dinner. 6 months after Ty died. 6 months, when I was still waking up in the middle of the night, reaching for his side of the bed. Harper, Ty would not want you to be bitter. Every time, the same request. Be smaller, take less, give way. And every time, I had said okay. I had folded myself into whatever shape the situation required and called it love and called it family and called it being the good daughter, and each time I said okay, I lost a piece of something I could not name until now. Mom, I said. My voice came from the bathroom floor, from the tile and the drain and the damp washcloth and the bruise on my arm where the IV had been 2 days ago. Dad forged my signature. He sold the house my husband left me. He did it while I was sedated during chemotherapy. And now you are calling to ask me to be quiet about it. My mother was crying. The tears sounded real, the way they always sounded real, because Carol Solis had genuine feelings about the messes her family made. She simply had those feelings for herself. I am not dropping the claim. I hung up. The phone landed on the tile with a sound like a small bone breaking. I lay on my side with my knees pulled up and my arms wrapped around Ty's hoodie and the bathroom light growing brighter as the sun climbed past the window, and I was cold and empty and alone in a way that goes past loneliness into something geographical, a kind of distance measured in miles that do not exist on any map, but I had said it. And I was not taking it back. That night I sat on the edge of my bed with my laptop open in front of me. the screen dark except for the wallpaper photograph of Ty on the porch at Gulf Shores, beer in one hand and pizza in the other, looking at the camera with the smile that only appeared when he forgot anyone else existed. The photograph was taken 6 days before the accident on Highway 98. I talked to Ty, silently, the way I had been doing for 3 years, in the private theater of my own head. They took the house, Ty. I corrected myself, because precision mattered. The oncologist had taught me that, and the chemo nurses, and the pharmacist who measured my anti-nausea medication in milliliters because a fraction of a degree in either direction was the difference between relief and a wasted day. Dad forged my name and sold our house. Our house. The word sat in my chest like something lodged between ribs. The house where I lay on the living room floor the first week after his funeral and listened to rain on the metal roof and made the decision, small and terrible and ordinary, to continue being alive. The house where Ty ran his yellow highlighter under the title insurance number and said, "Just in case," and where we sat on the porch floor that first afternoon with a cooler of beer and no furniture because the chairs would not arrive until Thursday. Who am I fighting for, Ty? The question arrived without warning, the way the important ones always did, rising from some place below conscious thought. I had been telling myself that this was about Ty, about his house, his memory, the last physical space on earth that held the shape of our life together. But sitting on the bed with my bones aching from the chemo and my mouth still tasting of the morning sickness, something shifted, and the thing that had been waiting underneath every argument and every phone call and every refusal I had made since Thursday afternoon finally surfaced. I was not fighting for Ty. Ty was gone. The house was wood and glass and a tin roof that leaked in the corner of the guest bathroom. The memories lived in me, not in the walls. If the house burned to the ground tomorrow, I would still remember the shrimp and the smoke detector and the just for me smile. I was fighting because every time something belonged to me, someone took it, and I let them. My bedroom at 14, handed to Valerie because Valerie needed more space. My voice at 22, swallowed at my father's retirement dinner because making a scene was worse than being ignored. My grief at 30, 6 months after burying my husband, reduced to bitterness by a mother who decided I had been sad long enough. Each time I gave something away, I told myself it was love, it was family, it was what good daughters do, and each time, the piece of me that went with it did not come back. The fight was about the right to have something and keep it, the right to say this is mine without apologizing for the space it takes up, the right to stand in the middle of my own life, even when that life included a hospital bed and a chemo port and a body that weighed 20 pounds less than it did a year ago and refused to move aside because someone else decided they needed what I had more than I did. The cancer had taken my hair and my appetite and 3 seasons of my life. It might take more before it was finished, but it could not take my right to be here, and neither could Glenn. I opened the laptop. The screen brightened and Ty looked up at me from the porch. Beer in hand, pizza in the other, smiling the smile I had memorized so thoroughly that I could see it with my eyes closed. I opened my email and typed a message to Renee Pryor. Renee, I am not dropping anything. Whatever you need from me, I will provide. Whatever they throw at me, I will take it. This is my house. It was my husband's. And my name is the only name that belongs on that deed. I pressed send. I closed the laptop. I lay down on the bed and pulled the covers to my chin, and for the first time since Thursday, I slept without waking up in the dark, with my hand reaching for Ty's side of the mattress. The sleep was deep and black and dreamless, and when my phone buzzed at midnight with Renee's reply, I did not hear it. Her message, which I would read in the morning with coffee and steady hands, said, "I was waiting for that email. Call me first thing tomorrow. There's been a development." Monday morning, I woke up with the kind of stillness that comes after a fever breaks. The nausea was gone, or at least it had retreated to a place where I could move without negotiating with it, and the light through the bedroom window was clean and white and carried no particular weight. I reached for my phone and found Renee's message from midnight. I was waiting for that email. Call me first thing tomorrow. There's been a development. I made coffee and carried it to the kitchen table. Black, because that was all my stomach would tolerate, and because somewhere in the past 7 months I had stopped adding milk and never gone back. The mug was one of Ty's, a thick ceramic thing from the Austell Company picnic with his name misspelled on the side. "Thank you, Solas." He had kept it because the error made him laugh every morning. I called Renee at 8:15. "The DA moved fast on this one," she said. Her voice had the focused quality of someone reading from notes. "I spoke with their office an hour ago. The fraud unit reviewed the referral Saturday morning and sent an investigator to the notary that same afternoon. Cheryl Voss cooperated immediately. She gave a full written statement confirming that your father brought the power of attorney to her office, that she never met you, and that she notarized the document based solely on his verbal assurance that you had authorized it." I listened with the coffee cooling in my hand. Combined with your hospital sedation records and the ring footage showing the realtor visit 14 days before the POA date, the judge signed an arrest warrant this morning. Forgery in the second degree, filing a forged instrument, and criminal use of a fraudulent power of attorney. When? The warrant is active. Baldwin County deputies could execute it as early as tomorrow. I set the coffee down on the counter beside the mug with Ty's misspelled name and stood in the kitchen for a long time without moving. Through the wall, my neighbor's television was on again, the same game show host with the same rising and falling voice, and outside the window a mockingbird was cycling through its catalog of stolen songs the way it did every morning on the power line behind the building. My father was going to be arrested. The man in the photograph on my refrigerator, carrying Valerie on his shoulders with the sunlight, making everything too warm and too gold. The man who brought oranges and weather and then disappeared. I picked up the coffee and drank it. It was cold by then, but I finished it anyway. The text from Renee arrived at 5:47 on Tuesday morning. Today, I was already awake. I had been awake since 4:30, lying in bed with my eyes open, watching the ceiling go from black to gray to the pale yellow of early light. The apartment was quiet in the way that things are quiet before something irreversible happens, and I could hear the building settling around me, pipes ticking and floors creaking, and somewhere on the 3rd floor a door opening and closing as someone left for an early shift. I got out of bed and made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table with the mug in both hands and watched the clock on the microwave count its way through the last minutes before 6, each digit changing with the patience of something that has never been in a hurry. When the 6 appeared, I set the mug down. It was happening right now, 22 miles away in Theodore, at the house where I grew up. At the front door my mother had painted blue the summer. I turned 11 because she said blue doors meant welcome. Deputies were walking up the driveway. Deputies were knocking. I sat with the coffee and the clock and the silence, and I waited. The call came at 7:32. The caller ID showed a Baldwin County number I did not recognize, and the voice on the other end identified herself as a victim advocate from the district attorney's office, calling as part of standard victim notification following an arrest. "Ma'am, I'm calling to inform you that Glenn Allen Solis was taken into custody at his residence at approximately 6:02 this morning. He's been charged with forgery in the second degree, filing a forged instrument, and criminal use of a fraudulent power of attorney." Was he cooperative? He was. He did not resist, and he did not make a statement. Your mother became very upset. The neighbors were outside by the time the vehicle left the residence. What did my mother say? A pause, the kind that told me the advocate was choosing how much to share. She was calling his name. "And yours." I closed my eyes. My mother standing in the doorway of the blue front door in her nightgown, calling his name and then mine, as if the two names together could undo what had already been done. The advocate continued. During the search incident to arrest, deputies recovered a second cellular device from Mr. Solis. A preliminary review of the device revealed communications with an unregistered number connected to illegal gambling enforcement activity. What kind of communications? Text messages. I can share a summary with you as the victim of record. I heard paper shuffling. The most recent message received on the device, dated approximately 10 days ago, reads in paraphrase, "Your daughter's house barely covered what she owes. We want the rest by the end of the month. Do not make us visit again." Barely covered what she owes, $720,000, and it had barely covered it. The gambling had gone further and deeper than any of us understood, and my father had known. He had known, and he had made his choice with the efficiency of a man who spent 35 years managing production schedules at a refinery where hesitation cost money. I thanked the advocate and hung up. The kitchen was bright now, full morning, the kind of light that fills a room so completely there are no shadows left to hide in. At 9, Renee called. Her voice carried something I had not heard before, a warmth that broke through the professional surface like sunlight through a cloud deck. "The deed will be voided within days," she said. "Your owner's policy protects your title. That is exactly what title insurance exists for. The buyer will have to pursue your father separately for their purchase price. That is between them and him. Your house is coming back to you, Harper." I held the phone against my ear and waited for the feeling of victory to arrive. It did not come. What came instead was weight. Something enormous and invisible lifting off my chest so gradually that the relief hurt before it healed, the way blood rushes back into a numb arm when you finally set down a suitcase you have been carrying too long. My phone buzzed again with my mother's name on the screen, and I declined the call, and it buzzed again, and I declined again, and it kept buzzing with the persistence of someone who believed that the 47th attempt would produce a different result than the first. I put the phone on the kitchen counter and walked to the sink and washed my coffee mug. The water ran warm over my hands and the soap made small bubbles that caught the light from the window. And behind me on the counter the phone kept buzzing, kept lighting up with my mother's name, and I kept my back to it. I dried the mug and put it in the cabinet and wiped down the counter and rinsed the sponge and hung it on the faucet, and by the time I turned around the screen had gone dark. Over the next 4 hours, my phone recorded 47 missed calls from my mother. I did not answer a single one. 3 weeks later, I drove to Gulf Shores. The chemo was finished. Cycle 6, the last one, had ended on a Wednesday, and the following Friday, my oncologist called with the scan results and used the words cautiously optimistic and significant tumor reduction, and we will continue monitoring. And I sat in my apartment and held the phone and breathed and said, "Thank you" 3 times, because I could not think of any other words large enough to hold what I was feeling. I took Interstate 65 south and then turned onto the coast road where the landscape opens up and the sky gets wide and you can smell the salt before you can see the water. The windows were down. The air changed as I drove, thickening with humidity and heat, late June in coastal Alabama, where the atmosphere is something you wear on your skin. I had not made this drive in 7 months, and every mile felt like a sentence in a language I was remembering how to speak. Coastal Heritage Drive, 14927. The house sat where it had always sat, a single story on stilts with a tin roof and a wooden porch that faced the dunes, and it looked exactly the same as it had in every Ring doorbell video I had watched over the past 7 months. The deed had been voided. The title had been restored. The name on the property records was Harper Solis, the only name that had ever belonged there. I parked in the driveway and sat in the car for a while. The Ring doorbell camera blinked its small blue light above the front door, recording my arrival the way it had recorded my father's arrival with the realtor, the way it had recorded every empty morning for 7 months. I looked up at the camera and raised my hand. The front door was locked with the same deadbolt Ty had installed the weekend we moved in because the original lock was flimsy and Ty did not believe in flimsy locks. The key turned and the door opened, and the smell of the house came out to meet me, salt and old wood and the particular mustiness of a home that has been closed up for 7 months with the windows sealed and the air conditioning off. Underneath all of it, so faint it might have been my imagination, something that was once Ty's aftershave but was now just a ghost of a molecule trapped in the grain of the floorboards. I walked through the living room, the kitchen. Everything was coated in a thin layer of dust, the kind that accumulates when a house holds its breath for 7 months. In the cabinet beside the stove, I found the pot. Ty's pot, the one with the black scorch mark on the bottom from the honeymoon dinner that went wrong in the best possible way. I had kept the pot. The scorch mark was proof that a perfect evening had once existed in this kitchen, and proof, unlike memory, does not fade. I left the pot where it was. I did not rearrange Ty's things. For the first time in 3 years, I walked through this house without stopping to touch every surface he had touched, without pressing my face into the curtains to check if his scent was still there, without sitting in his chair on the porch and pretending he had just gone inside for another beer. I walked through the house, and I opened the windows. Every one. The kitchen, the living room, the bedroom, the guest bathroom with the corner where the roof leaked. I unlocked the back door and propped it wide with a cinder block, and the Gulf air came in, hot and wet and heavy with salt, and the house drew its first breath in 7 months. I went out to the porch. The 2 Adirondack chairs sat where they had always sat, side by side, facing the dunes and the strip of white sand and the water beyond. Ty's chair was the one on the left, the one with the beer bottle ring stained into the armrest. I sat down in it. The wood was warm from the sun, and the cushion was stiff from months of disuse, and it creaked under my weight, the way old wooden furniture does when it remembers what it is for. The feeling was different this time. For 3 years I had sat in this chair and called it Ty's chair, and felt his absence in the shape of the seat and the angle of the armrest and the view he had loved. But today I sat down and the chair was just a chair, and the porch was just a porch, and the house was just a house, and all of those things belonged to me. The grief was still there, folded into the grain of the wood like the scorch mark on the pot, but it was not the only thing. There was something else now, something that had room to exist because I had stopped filling every space with what I had lost. My phone rang. I looked at the screen, and the name that pulsed there was the one I had been hoping for, without admitting it to myself. It was Valerie. I watched her name pulse on the screen and let it ring twice. Then I picked up. "Hey, Val. Hey." Her voice was small and careful, the voice of someone who is not sure if they are still welcome. "I wanted to tell you something. I signed up for a program, Gamblers Anonymous. The first meeting is tonight." The Gulf wind blew across the porch and carried the smell of salt and warm sand and the particular sweetness that lives in the air above shallow water in late June. I listened to the wind, and I listened to my sister breathing on the other end of the line. "Good," I said. "Harper?" "Yeah. Can I call you after? After the first meeting?" "You can." I hung up and put the phone on the armrest of the chair, Ty's armrest, where the beer bottle ring was. The sun was dropping toward the water, and the light was doing the thing it did in the photograph on my laptop, turning everything too warm, too gold, too much like a memory that has not been made yet. The waves came in and pulled back and came in again, indifferent to who owned this house or who sat in a county jail 22 miles north or who was calling 47 times without an answer. There was a comfort in their indifference. I reached up and touched my hair. It had started coming back 2 weeks ago, short and soft, growing in a shade darker than the hair I had lost. I ran my fingers through it the way you run your fingers through something new and unexpected, something that arrived without permission and decided to stay. My phone buzzed on the armrest, a notification from the Ring doorbell. Motion detected at front door. I opened the app and there I was, sitting on the porch in the Adirondack chair, small and still on the grainy screen, alive in the house that was mine.